And we're recording. Good morning, Northwoods. How are we doing today? This is our monthly chapel, and we've been doing these for quite a while now. And I just want to welcome everybody listening at home on Facebook or Instagram or wherever you're finding this link. But yeah, we have some great guests today. We have a couple of guests. We have Mr. Matt Apuzzo, who's going to be joining us a little bit later, and I'm excited for that. But first, unfortunately, we have a bit of sad news. So one of our own, an absolute legend of camp, John Keeler, is unfortunately passed away. And it's really sad news. So I wanted to bring in a dear friend of his and somebody that absolutely can give him justice, and it's Walter. So if we welcome Walter, and he can talk a little bit about John Keeler. Hi, Walter.
Hi, how you doing? It's very sad that John is gone. Later on in his life, I'd say about the past 10 years, his physical health basically deteriorated. And I'm going to go through a little bit about that later on. Paul Cuneo, who was a contemporary of John Keeler's and a contemporary of mine, counselor, said of John Keeler that when Paul left, I believe in 1956, John Keeler looked like Tarzan. And when he came back to the old timers in 1991, he looked like Ben Franklin, which was pretty funny because John really did look like Ben Franklin.
Yep.
My first memories of John were kind of interesting. He was a counselor in the trail section when I was there in cabin 6, which is now the Trail LT. And he was a great underwater swimmer and used to do a thing every time we had the waterfront carnival. He would swim in from the point underwater. All right.
Wow.
Of course, there was a rowboat there to guide him, and of course he was coming up behind the rowboat to catch a breath, but nobody knew that, so we all thought he could do that. Probably could if he wanted to. He's a really good swimmer. But my favorite memory of him when younger, we had to go on a trip to the presidential range, Northern Presidentials. And we all rode in the back of the camp truck to Dolly Cop Camp, north of North Conway, in the rain, with a tarp on top that wasn't working very well. And we got to the place in Dolly Cop Camp, which had been set up by John Keeler, which is a big tent and a fireplace. And Keeler had a car that he was coming in and out of. It was raining. He was only in a bathing suit. And we were cold and wet and whatever, but Keeler was responsible for cooking dinner. And he was an ex-Wilderness Patrol guy and a great campfire cook and this kind of thing, but he could not get the fire started. It was just too wet. So he siphoned some gas out of the vehicle, not kerosene, gasoline, poured it on the logs, right, and lit a match and hit it. And it blew the campfire to smithereens.
Wow.
The blue flame was going all over the place. It almost hit us. All right. It was really pretty funny. And finally, George Morse, known as Mowgli, and Keeler finally got a fire started. And the menu for the night was barbecued chicken, all right, which we ate rare, if you could, which wasn't too good, but that was all Keeler's fault. All right. And he really was a very good cook. In the old days, we used to have a cookout with the Wilderness Patrol, which is a separate section of seniors that only did hiking and camping, and they were very good at all the wilderness type things, and particularly cooking. And I remember going over there as a junior and getting sticky buns that had been baked in a reflector oven by John Keeler. All right, and those are my earliest memories. I didn't know anything about him until much later. In 1989, John and Charlie Horner created what's called a bridge project. Horner's Bridge spanned the little stream that goes down from the Great Hall, and it's right down by the waterfront. It's been rebuilt a few times, but it was in bad shape. And Horner and Keeler got together in 1989, and they decided to rebuild that bridge. The old timers rebuilt it a couple more times because, quite frankly, it takes a little heat from the ice, all right, coming in, all right, that comes in right there and really smashes into the bridge and has wrecked it a few times. Keeler started this bridge project, which we call the Old Timers Group, in '89. And from that time until probably about 15 years later, we have built about 10 footbridges around camp. I tried to do a count last night. I think I came up with 10, but it could be more. The pavilion at the upper ball field where the bathrooms are, which we lovingly refer to as the Keeler John, we built that. The frame, the base, the frame, and the roof we did in one day.
Wow.
All the wood, all the beams for that and everything had been cut on site by Mike McCarthy, and we had to cut them up and do that. That was quite a deal. We were pretty tired after that, but we also built the finished off part of the building in Shangri-La. We built steps to the Rohrig Center. We did a lot of projects, and Keeler was involved in all of them, walking around, all right, sitting on a stump, taking photographs of us working, all right. He was, but he organized everything. And the night before, he got everybody to come back, and he hosted a dinner, sort of a reunion for old timers, and at his own expense. And then after the work was over on Saturday, we all went out and he hosted another dinner at his own expense and kept this going for a long time. And it's what got me reconnected to camp. I had been away from camp for a long time, and I called the camp to find out what was going on, if anything. And they told me about this old timers group. So I contacted Keeler. And in the beginning, I had to drive up Friday night after work. I would go to bed at about 6 at night and wake up at midnight and drive up to camp, ready to start work on Saturday morning. Keeler also provided lunch. He provided everything. His most important contribution to Northwoods, aside from just his presence, was the photography program. John built and supplied the photography lab in the Rohrig Center and did it for years. All right. He resupplied everything every year. He opened it, he closed it, he trained the staff, and it's really a working photography lab, and kids can actually learn something from taking that activity. Later, as I said, physical problems started to hound John, but it didn't stop his personality or his attitude. John was outspoken always. If he saw something wrong with camp, he would say something. It was always to the betterment of camp in mind. He was a terrific friend to the camp. He was loyal. He was honest. And like a lot of us old timers, there's an 11-year-old boy inside of us that never grew up. And that was John Keeler. He was a good friend. And as I'm getting older, and so a lot of the old timers are gone now, it's hard to think of some of these guys like John Keeler and John Trump and Dave Norton, and some of these wonderful people who built a lot of things at camp and continued to contribute to camp well into their old age. It was a great group. It was a great group of people, and John Keeler was responsible for it. And I'm going to miss him terribly. And I think the camp is too, in ways that they don't realize yet. All right. And so I would like, if possible, for all of us to kind of take a little minute of silence in memory of John Keeler. If we could do that, I'd appreciate it, starting now. Thanks. Okay, Jago, you can tell Mighty Mouth he's on.
Oh, he's coming up. Yeah, well, thank you so much, Walter. That was absolutely beautiful, and yeah, I appreciate that a lot, and I'm sure a lot of other people do as well. I was lucky enough to obviously sit with him for a while in the photo lab and and discuss in the doc room and just have chats with him as well. Only a few meetings really, but yeah, what he did for camp was unbelievable. I just want to thank him, obviously, and yeah, hopefully him and his family are doing well. But yeah, thank you so much, Walter.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
so yep. Moving on, we are here with one of my favorite people in the world. He is a person that I've known for pretty much a lot of his life. He was beautifully one of my first CITs when I was the first CIT director. And then he moved on up and became EC and became a great friend of mine. So welcome, Matt Apuzzo. How are we doing today?
Oh, I'm wonderful, Jago. I'm wonderful. It's nice to hear you talk so nicely about that CIT year. One of my favorites. Poor Jago. Had no idea what he was getting into with the 20 of us in Woodside.
Yep.
It was
There was
quite
a
the
lot of
summer.
you.
Yes, there was. Yes, there was. The fact that Jago came out of that sane is a small miracle, if anything.
Yeah, it was an experience, that's for sure. When there was like, oh yeah, you have CITs, and it's like you have 20, and then Matt Puzo and his group. I was like, oh boy, here we go, here we go. And there was plenty of stories in that cabin.
Oh, yes, there was. Yes, there was.
But no, I loved it actually. It was one of my favorite summers, for sure. We got a lot done. We got a lot going, and yeah, it was brilliant. Yeah. So, but let's hear about your story a little bit. Like, where did you start at camp? Like, why did you come to camp? What was the first initial get into camp? What happened?
Yeah. So my first summer at camp was 2004. And ironically, it's like my parents, they thought I might want to go to summer camp. I'd done like day camp, those sorts of things for a minute. And one thing that was weird is we had heard about the camp through a friend. But the summer before, we accidentally my dad and we went and looked at Belknap. And then we realized that, oh, this is not the camp that people told us about. And very conveniently, it was Northwoods. And that's where it started. So I started as a trailer in Trail 1. So wonderful, like right on the lower ball field, right by the lake. And that's how I got started. And I did 2 weeks. And I still remember at the end of those 2 weeks when my parents came to pick me up, it was one of those of how long can I drag this out? How many people can they meet? How many people can they see? How can I stay? And I still remember getting in the back of the car and like hiding in the back of the car because I was so upset that I had to leave. But as I was leaving, I still remember like driving up the road and already saying, it's like, I'll be back. And that was 2004. And there's been a couple years here and there that I haven't been able to make it back, but it's been just about every year going to be 15 this year. So
Yeah,
that's how it started.
yeah, it's crazy because I didn't know this, but it was my first year as well that year, 2004. So I was a early international, as you was a early trailer, and then like I say, yeah, we've known each other since first meeting at Northwoods, I guess. I remember first knowing who you were properly as a senior because and for some reason I still have this picture of you. You're in a dress, and I don't know why. As a camper, you're in this dress, and I'm like, it must be a skit or something going on. But yeah, that was like, I don't know who's your counselor was. You was definitely not in my cabin, but
no, the year. Oh boy, so that was goodness, that was probably my second, third summer, and we had done the Mr. Northwoods pageant, and one of the counselors, which is Graham's friend, Charlie.
Yep.
We had dressed him up in that, and then I quickly took over it, and like he won because he was Mandy, but I quickly took it and became Mindy. And yeah, that dress was that's funny. That picture pops up every once in a while, and a good friend Allie Mack always never lets me forget. I think she still calls me Mindy to this day, even though it's been 10, 15 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like I say, it's just because I've got that picture, it's just a memory that's kind of stuck with me a little bit as well, in the senior section, because that's where I was for the most part,
Yeah.
which is great. So then, yeah, you became my CIT and you was with that crew, and you've got Harry Abrams and Ryan Morgan and Abu and all sorts of other people that was in that group. Was that the time when you was like, yes, this, I want to be a staff member. I want to be at camp for as long as I want. Like, what
Oh
what
yeah.
was what was the change for wanting to be a staff,
Yeah. I mean, it
or
was
did you know
definitely
straight
that.
away?
Yeah. I knew that I just like as many summers, as many sessions, as many weeks that I can spend up in the summer. But that's 5 weeks. I credit for a lot. Like that CIT year. I feel like that is when I really came into my own as like a
Mhm.
person. And knowing that like, I could be myself 100%. And that like I was really good at a lot of the stuff of like working with kids, and being on staff. And it was just, that was like, I think of like a big turning point for me of where I like grew into my own, and grew into myself. And then I was like, yeah, absolutely. I want to be working here. I want to be a counselor. And I think that's also what helped me like kickstart my thinking, my ideas about, what I do now, like as a teacher. Of like, I realized then is like how much I enjoyed, working with kids, and helping them develop as both, human beings, but like their like actual skills, but also, uh, like the real world skills, the people skills, that sort of thing, which I think camp does a wonderful job of like helping kids develop that in a very unique and independent way. Because when you're 11, 12, 13, and you're still kind of on your own with a bunch of strangers in a cabin, and then at the end of 2 4 weeks it's like you've known each other for your whole life. But
Yep.
yeah, that was a huge summer that I think really kick-started like my idea of like wanting to work with kids and spending my life working with kids, as a teacher, as a camp, work at camp, whatever it might be.
Yeah, well, you're welcome, because that was all me and
Yeah,
my
thank you.
training as the CIT director. Yes, so you are welcome.
Yep.
And the world is welcome for having him teach, because you are one of the best. And yeah, and I do interview a lot of CITs. I've interviewed a lot of staff members in the past, and still doing it, and they still mention your name as being an influence and that role model that they want to aspire to. So yeah, the stuff that you do at camp, then now, just want to say thank you for that, and for other people too, because I know that you've done a lot for camp, and it's definitely affected a lot of people in a really good way. So thank you for that. Yeah, so you moved on. You did a few years as a staff member. Like, what activities? I know you love the waterfront. Like, what were the kind of activities that you liked at camp? Like, was it just waterfront? Did you go and do other things as a staff
Yeah.
member, or what
As a
what did you
staff member, I spent all my time at the waterfront. I loved it. I was a waterfront guy, sailing, snorkeling, windsurfing. If you look at some of the waterfront plaques that we've made over the years, you'll see, my name up there for a couple years. And yeah, I mean, I loved all the different, like as a camper, I still tried to take advantage of as many, of the different activities that camp offers. But for sure, I was always going to be at the waterfront for at least, half the day, whether it was sailing. It was usually sailing most of the time, but
Mhm.
canoeing, kayaking, just all of it. But yeah, I would say like as my time as a staff member, it was, a lot of fun, like kind of taking what I had learned through like when I was a camper, as through sailing or swim lessons, and then just taking and building on that, but also trying to add new things. Like I remember a couple years when I think it was Eli and Duncan when they started the snorkeling, and then turning snorkeling into like a much more like fully fledged activity, with like different activities and different like challenges and things, or like windsurfing when I worked with Tom Anderson, and just like kind of learning how to windsurf while teaching it at the same time, which was kind of ironic. It was the same thing with, water skiing. Of like I've been able to get up on skis maybe twice, but they had me in the water trying to like just basically help kids, okay, sit back, put your weight back, launch off, and then like I would try to do it. But outside of that, like I love doing ropes. I still am one of the few, a small group that when they did ropes as a camper was in the only non-co-ed group. So that, yeah, I was very lucky, but at the same time, it was a wonderful experience, and I would never change it. I still remember, I have the award somewhere. Ironically, Jago gave me the Future Ropes Instructor award.
Really?
And I hated to disappoint him when I was very much a waterfront guy through and through. But yeah, I loved it. That's what I focused on as staff, but I did everything like riflery, archery. I'm still trying to get Ryan and I, a couple years ago, we tried to start long games. We're going to keep trying. One of these days it will be a full activity, but it was just it was a lot of fun. Yeah.
I remember that. You was like, yes, lawn games, it's going to be the future. I'm like, okay, maybe. Still not there yet, but we're building on it. We're building on it.
It'll be there one of these days, I'm telling you.
And that snorkel program, and Aaron Green's on the call currently, and I know he loves snorkeling. He was a big fan of the snorkel crew, which is great. Yeah, but you definitely love the waterfront. I know that each summer that you come back, the first thing you do is head to that water, and you're like, there it is, there's camp. That's what I've been missing, and I need to jump in that lake as soon as humanly possible.
Mhm.
I'm not even going to get changed. I'm just going to walk in there. Let's go. Yeah, great. So yeah, and like I say, I've saw you being a staff member and doing wonderful things on the waterfront, as well as being in the cabin with the kids, and just being a character at camp in general. Like you and Ryan would become a trash monster at some stage. And I don't know what you was doing, but I just at one meal sometimes, and then you just coming in. I'm like, what is going on? Like some of the ideas that you and Ryan came up with, and a few others. Like, where was that creativity come from? Like, what do you do? Like, why was you doing stuff like that?
Yeah, I think that's just like one of the wonderful things about camp, of just like you can do these crazy things, and like the next thing you realize, like people remember you. Like Ryan and I, we found a trash bag. We found a giant trash bag, and we're able to put both of our heads through it in one arm, and we were able to just become trash monster. But I think that's just like one of the things of like it is such a safe and welcoming place where you can really be yourself and just do random and crazy things and not really have to worry about like what someone is thinking about, or if like they're sitting there and judging you, because more often than not, like people are going to be doing the same things. And whether, it's random things in the dining hall or activities, or at like whole camp events or campfires and the skits and random songs, whatever. I think it allows people to become incredibly more creative in like a lot of different ways, that it's best for them, because it's like you can kind of explore. It's like, do you want to be creative in like a more like artsy way, or kind of like the way that you work with each other and interact with each other, or the jokes you might do, or the pranks, or whatever it may be. And it's just like a really wonderful time to do it. So I think it's just like some people might be more creative or less, but when you're there, when you're at camp, it really encourages you to just like explore like yourself and what you want to be and how you want to act in a way that's like really safe and welcoming, so you can do these crazy things, like dressing up. Like so far we've talked about me in a dress, now in a garbage bag. I'm sure more will come up, but it's just like, it's a way to be yourself and not worry about judgment or bullying or feeling, ostracized, which is really nice. And I think that's like, it's true for everybody. And you can be your most creative self or yourself, like however you want. And that's like one of the very special things about camp.
Yeah, and that's a perfect reason why I come back to camp and come to Northwoods all the time. And I've seen it through endless campers, endless staff, and you just be who you want to be, and you don't get judged. And I've seen some staff members wearing like the craziest coat I've ever seen in my life, and I'm like, and it's like, what do you think? And everyone's like, beautiful, love it, it's the best thing ever, go for it. Yep, Yep, there's no judgment. It don't even matter what you're wearing, how you're acting. Like, you can be who you want to be, and that's why I do love Northwoods, and I know that we all do on this call, and why it's so special. But yeah, I mean, if we're going to talk about dressing up, what about the parade?
My and Walter, yeah, Walter was there for quite a few of these. But yeah, it started. I was always a junior section counselor, and so one of the wonderful things is the junior section gets to participate in the Wolfboro 4th of July parade. And so I started going, and like everybody would be dressed up, red, white, and blue, and headbands, capes, flags, whatever it may be. And then I just happened to have a hot dog costume. That, I mean, what's more American than a hot dog? I don't know. So I just thought it was like a very fitting thing. And so I've done that parade, 8, 9, 10 times at this point. And being the hot dog guy with the Northwoods and Pleasant Valley, juniors was always fun. And it got to the point where there was a couple of years where people were like, "Oh, hot dog guy is back." And it was always wonderful because I remember I would run into, like, when we were going through this and like with all the juniors, and it's such a fun, crazy morning, and it's just like a wonderful day in general. But yeah, those parades I just going along the route and would run into parents of campers, campers that would be like there later in the summer, or like former campers, former staff members. But one year I still remember going along, and right by the Three Wives, Three Sisters gas station, there was a couple, like a family, and they were all dressed in these floral shirts that had hot dogs and hamburgers on it. And they're like, come over, and then they had all the juniors were there. And it was just like one of those things of, again, just like being able to have fun and kind of bring some of like that camp energy, that camp vibe outside of camp to Wolfboro in a very fun way that apparently some people remember. So it's been a lot of fun, and that hot dog suit has gotten a lot of good use, a lot of good times, and
A lot of miles.
yeah, there's definitely been a lot of miles in that hot dog suit for sure.
Yeah, brilliant. And it is. It's a highlight of your summer, I know, and I know it's a highlight of a lot of juniors and some staff members that to go on that 4th of July parade. And first session is why first session is so great is the fireworks and that parade, definitely for the juniors.
Me too.
And yeah, and you all are right. Like you're always there, and I know, and that's why we love having you there at first session too. But you mentioned like your junior section head, like, so as an EC member, I know you came back, and you've always had a love for the juniors. Like, why the junior section? Why did you want to be the junior section head for so long?
That's a good question. I think I've always I've not worked in another section, like from my CIT year to now. I've always been in the junior section, and I think like just the spot, like the junior section is beautiful. It's definitely one of my favorite places on camp, and the best section. Sorry, I know I've got some former trailheads in this room, but sorry, no dice. But anyways, yeah, I think it's something about, like, with juniors, they're taking, like, whether they know it or not, like they're taking a really crazy risk at 8, 9, 10 years old, going away from home and living on your, like, being away from home for 2, 4. I mean, I've had a couple that, their first summer they were spending 6, 8 weeks at camp, which is impressive.
Yeah.
But it's also like, it's just a lot of fun because you get the best of both worlds of, like, the excitement for camp is there, and it's a lot of work, but I think it's also very rewarding because then, like, hopefully I've had some juniors, like Ray is one of them, in this room, that then, I got to see when they were 8, 9, and now, they fell in love with camp, and they've been a part of camp for the last, 8, 9, 10 years. I think that's really exciting to see. I think it's just like you have the most fun. Like, they're very excitable. You can get all the way. I think you can be your craziest self with juniors. And I know I loved Like I've had the pleasure of working with a bunch of wonderful counselors that they loved working in the junior section. They knew it was a lot of hard work and it was going to be a lot more like hands-on. And but at the same time, it was like they felt like it was the most rewarding that came out of it. The way the kids would interact, the way they would watch. I still remember watching, my junior cabins like grow up over just the 2 weeks of kind of being a mess when things started, and then by the end, cleaning the cabin, taking care of themselves, and it's very fun and fascinating watching these 8 to 10-year-olds really grow up in a short amount of time, and a way that's also very rewarding. And then hopefully, if we do something right, you see them coming back year after year and continuing to grow and develop as young men.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I've seen it within your sections and other people's too. And just seeing those, like you say, 8, 9, 10-year-olds come into this camp for 2 weeks, maybe the first time away from home, but wow, they grow so much and through fun as well. It's not just like we're teaching them like manners and behavior, which we do, but at the same time, we're just teaching them to have fun, work with people, work with others, and just get along. And just that development is so special. And that's what we love at camp, right?
Absolutely.
And yeah, and it's brilliant. And I know like one of the fun things that you do, and it was always a highlight to see, is that feast thing you do. Like what
Yeah. Yes, I loved because it's like one of my favorite parts about being a junior section head was like the section nights
Yep.
and all the different things, like the different like whole section activities we would be able to do. And I still remember like my first year, was like I was hell bent on being like, I'm gonna come up like every session is gonna be something new. It's gonna be a new section night. It's gonna be something different. But I was starting to run out of ideas because it was probably third, fourth session at this point. And that's where instead we did, I still remember when I was working as a counselor, we did like a birthday junior night. And so there's all like these birthday themes. And I'm like, okay, we can, let's take this, but let's change it up a little bit. So it became Festivus. And so we had the junior section Festivus for the rest of us. And well, obviously based off of the a bit from Seinfeld. And so we would have our feast, and if you remember it, you have to have pasta with the red sauce. And I kind of took some artistic liberties, so you can't use utensils. The only thing that's served is chocolate milk. So it was just wonderful. You see all these juniors, drinking out of bowls because on Festivus we don't believe in cups, and we believe in silverware. So you have all these kids, just inhaling all the spaghetti and just going. And it was wonderful because a couple years ago we got it filmed, and it's just so funny watching. And it's one of my favorite videos of just all the kids, just tearing into spaghetti and meatballs. And then of course the ironic part about it is then afterwards we have the feats of strength. So they have these full bellies of spaghetti and meatballs and chocolate milk. They've just gorged themselves. And then they have to go and participate in all these different challenges to just prove how strong they are and to get, in the good graces of what I call the Festivus Fairy. So there's the aluminum pole in the junior section. They had to leave offerings there. And then the next morning they would wake up and there would be like a special breakfast. So it was a fun way to take a section night and just build it into something that was just chaos. It really was just chaos. It's okay, you're gonna hit apples with tennis rackets and try to see how long you can keep a mouthful of hot sauce, or balancing balance challenges, or and then praising a Festivus fairy, and then you get donuts at breakfast the next day. But it was always just one of those fun things again to see the kids just be themselves and have fun and not really worry about table manners or making sure all the food ends up where it's supposed to be. And it was just like one of those fun chaotic junior nights.
Yeah, absolutely. And they just love it. Have the smiles on their faces, the laughter that you hear across the field. It's a good time. It's one of the best things that you've done for camp as well. And well, just one little thing, but yeah, it was really cool. Absolutely. It's interesting the people who got on the call. You got a junior section head, a trail section head, and a senior section head currently, which is really cool. And It's good to see everybody. Great. Well, yeah. Is there anything else that you want to say, Apuzo? Is there anything that crossed your mind a little bit more about camp?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the big thing is that like it's been because of current events and everything. It's been like 2 years since I've been at camp, and it's the longest it's ever been. And so it's left me with a much more profound sense of like gratitude for camp and everything. It's like Jago, like you mentioned, like the things that I've done for camp, but really that's like pale in comparison to what camp has done for me, and what I know it's done for a lot of my friends, a lot of the kids that I've seen throughout the years. And I just like the bonds, the relationships that you build. I mean, I'm looking at two like now, like with Aaron and Evan, we worked as counselors together. We were all on EC together. And when we had the Winter Summit a couple weeks ago, this is the first time I'd seen Evan in probably 2 years, and we picked up like nothing had happened. And that's like one of the things that I've always loved about camp is that it does not matter how long it might have been, you can pick up right where you left off. I know it's been the case, like just last year, one of our CITs together, Andrew Koenig, came through Kansas City because he was moving out to Denver. And I hadn't seen him since we were counselors together in like 2009, 2010. And he came, he spent the night here, and we picked up right where it was just like we were back in Woodside, which for good and bad. To bring up those memories. But I think it's just like one of the things that is really wonderful and special about camp is just like those relationships with people, and it's just like the strength of those relationships, the depth of those relationships. I still remember it's just like in such a short amount of time. And like one of the best examples I have of this was 2015, my first summer on EC. We had the wonderful Sam McKnight, Batman, working at camp, and that was his first summer as a counselor. And I had not met him before that. And then 10 weeks go by, and he's flying out to Kansas City to come visit me while I was going to school at KU. And some of my closest friends growing up, in Ashland haven't come out, or I only see them when I come back to Boston. But here's a guy that I just met 10 weeks ago is willing to fly to Kansas City and spend, 3 days, with me before traveling elsewhere. And it's like he had only a couple weeks to travel and visit before he had to go back, and he still chose to come out and see me. So I think that really speaks to like the nature of the relationships that you build over time. And I think that's one of the most special things about camp, and it transcends camp. It goes beyond. I mean, Jago, I still think about the number of times we've gone on road trips, or you've come through Kansas City, or or when we were at in North Carolina last year, 2 years ago, whatever it was, feels forever. And it's just one. It's like nothing ever changed. It's like we've still been at camp, and we just hit the pause button and then able to hit play and start back up right again. So
Yeah,
I think that's a very special part about camp.
it does. And you said it excellently there, because you have those connections, and it's amazing how you can do it so quickly. And I've had no end of them, and it's so cool. And you're right there when it's like you kind of get that nervous feeling before you go and see someone that you haven't seen for a long while. But then as soon as you meet someone that you've met from camp, it's like boom. It's like the best thing. It's like you was there yesterday talking to him, like it's insane. But yeah, those connections you build at camp are the best, I think anywhere in the world.
Absolutely.
And I really do think that. Well, great. Well, thank you so much, Apuzo. As always, it's great talking to you and hearing everything that you have to say. And yeah, so thank you so much for joining us today. Again, Walter, thank you so much for speaking at the start. And for anybody at home, I hope to see you all next month, middle of the month, and we'll have another special guest that I'm going to try and get hold of soon. So thank you everybody for joining us today, and I will see you all next month.
Stay up.
Goodbye.
Bye.